The ticket number 12 is in. Let us go back to New York.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cover One, the podcast. I am Russell Brown. This is episode number 44, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Last week was 43. This week it's 44. Welcome to the show. First time, if this is the first time you've ever listened, I want to welcome you. I want you to head over to Twitter, give me a follow at Russ NFL Draft. Ton of NFL Draft content on my page pretty much every single day. Random stuff too. It's a lot of fun, and that's where you can find this podcast every single week. There's a link to it all the time, or you can head over to cover1.net. And you'll find the podcast there. You'll find our scouting reports, all of our NFL draft takes, and a lot of X and O breakdown, talking actual football regarding the Buffalo Bills, again, the draft prospects, and so much more. So be sure to go to cover1.net. Be sure to hit me a follow on Twitter, and be sure to subscribe to this on YouTube, on iTunes. Just type in Cover One, the podcast, and you'll find it. And a lot of good stuff there. And today, I'm going to be starting the show with some unfortunate stuff, some unfortunate news. It's not the way I want to do the show, but I feel like it's something that I need to do. And the reason why is because I saw a tweet today from Benjamin Albright, who is very well respected in the NFL draft community and just football in general. Really, really nice guy. Met him down in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. Really nice guy. And he brought up a tweet that I thought was very interesting, but he's 100% correct. And he talked about how we need to get off our asses and quit saying, my thoughts and prayers are with you in your devastating loss, and I hope everything gets better, and stuff like that. And he's absolutely right. Sending out a tweet that says, my thoughts and prayers are with you and your friends and family during this tough time, or making a Facebook post about it, or going on Instagram, yes, it could gain a lot of attention and get 100,000 retweets or 100,000 likes. It could be noticed by the President of the United States. At the end of the day, what good does it do when that's all you talk about? You don't find a solution. You don't help form something that makes things better. Because right now, the tragic events in Florida are not good. It doesn't make things better with what's going on right now. And if you don't know what's going on, authorities today had responded to reports of shots being fired near Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. The local sheriff had said that there were multiple injuries, and the superintendent said that there were multiple people dead. And if you go to Twitter, if you go to social media, you'll see videos of students taking videos in the classrooms that they were in on lockdown at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and you'll see and you'll hear the gunman shooting, or a gunwoman, whoever it is. The shooter has been taken into custody. They have not been identified. And it's some very scary stuff. But before I got on the air today, CNN posted on Twitter that at least 16 people have been killed. And I truthfully, I can't fathom it. I'm a father. I have a 7-year-old son. He goes to elementary school every day. A couple years from now, he'll become a young man. He'll go to middle school. He'll go to high school. And I can't fathom this. And it terrifies me every single day because I don't see my son every single day. I don't. And I'm going to share my personal life on this podcast today because I feel like I need to do something, because Ben Albright had said we need to do something, and he's absolutely right. We have to do something. As a country, we have to do something. People say, America's the greatest country in the world. We're number one at everything. No, we're not. We're not number one in education. We're not number one in a lot of things. But you know what we are number one at? This type of stuff. Mass killings. Shooting our own people. Shooting good guys. Bad guys. It doesn't matter. We're good at that stuff. Other stuff, we're not. And it makes me wonder, are we really the greatest country in the world anymore? Because there's a serious mental health issue. And before I even get into the mental health issue, before you exit out of this podcast, before you hit stop, before you unsubscribe to the podcast and you unfollow me on Twitter and you report me or block me for whatever, I want you to understand something. I'm not Republican, nor am I Democrat, nor am I Green Party, Tea Party. It doesn't matter what political structure I believe in. It doesn't matter about that. It doesn't matter if I'm black or white. It doesn't matter how old I am, 25, 26, 37, 94. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many kids I have. It doesn't matter if I served in the military, if I'm a police officer. It doesn't matter who I am or what I am. The fact of the matter is that there's a serious health issue, mental health issue in this country. And right now, hundreds of students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, were either physically harmed, emotionally harmed, or mentally harmed because of this mental illness that we have. I don't know the right answers, and I don't know the first thing that there is to know about purchasing a gun. I have no clue. I don't own one, nor do I plan on owning one. I understand people collect guns as a hobby. People collect guns to go hunt wild game, rabbits, deer, duck. I get it. They have guns for protection. I fully understand why you have guns. I fully understand why I have a crazy hat collection. I like hats. I understand why my wife has a lot of shoes. She likes shoes. We live in a country where we have freedom, but every single person in this country abuses their freedom because they're selfish, because there's mental health issues in this country, and I have no idea how to fix it. And again, I have no idea how to purchase a gun. I have no idea how to get a gun. I know there's some tests that you have to take, some safety stuff, but I mean, how severe are these tests? Do they test how mentally stable you are? Do they look at your medical records? Do they look at that stuff? Or are these people buying guns off the black market? Now, I understand this event in Florida. It's a high school student. I understand he didn't go buy a gun because he wasn't 18 years old. Or she didn't go buy a gun because she wasn't 18 years old. I mean, maybe she was. Maybe she did. Maybe you don't even have to be 18. Maybe you have to be 21. Again, I have no idea. I'm not going to research on how to buy a gun because I'm never going to buy a gun. And maybe I should have done that before I got on the air, but I'm speaking strictly from the heart, from my opinion, and that I think it doesn't matter whether we have guns or not. There's a mental health issue that needs to be fixed, and how the hell do we fix it? Because I don't know how. I would love to stand up for it and find a way and be part of something that fixes it and solves it, because every single day I have to go to work and think about my son potentially having this happen to him one day. And I can't fathom that. To the parents that own guns, you better put a lock on that frickin' safe that you have guns. Put them far, far away from your kids, because they see stuff on TV, they see stuff in video games, they see stuff on social media, and they think they're cool when they do it. But they're not. And they're ruining their lives, they're ruining your lives, and more importantly, they're ruining plenty of others. And today, hundreds of lives have changed. Hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions, because of this mental health issue. Now, to the people that have these mental health issues, if you're battling demons personally, whether it's physical demons, emotional, mentally, whatever it is, talk to somebody. Go to a doctor, seek help, get some medication. We all go through personal stuff. We all have things outside of here. Every student in America right now, every child that goes to school, they have something outside of school, outside of the 7 or 8 hours that they go to school for. When they go home and they get on the bus, or they get picked up by their mom or dad, or they just drive themselves home, they have something that's going on at home. Mom and dad are divorced. Mom's boyfriend beats her. Dad's an alcoholic. All these things happen all the way across America. It happened in my house. I know it's happening in plenty of others. But guess what? You battle through it. You keep fighting. You step back up to the plate and you keep swinging. That's what you do. You don't just go and shoot people. You don't just end things. And if that's your thought, again, mental health issue. Go seek help. That's what I want you to do. That's what you need to do. And it's not just me that wants it. Millions of people want you to do the same thing, because you could potentially harm me, somebody else, my child, my wife. Doing those things are not okay, no matter who you are or what you are. I don't care what your race is, what your religious belief is. If you're harming somebody or you're thinking of harming somebody, you need to go get help. You need something to help you. And again, we all deal with personal stuff every single day. Every single day. When I was 17 years old and I graduated high school, I wasn't even 18 years old yet, and this girl tells me she's pregnant. I could have stopped everything. I could have ended it all. But that wasn't even a thought in my mind. Was I devastated? Sure. Was I bummed? Sure. Why? Because I was 17, about to be 18, just graduated high school, was going to go off to college. I was going to go room with my buddies. We were going to go and drink and party and have fun. Now, did I end up doing those things? I sure did, but not the way I wanted to. There was a speed bump along the road, and guess what I did? I stepped up to the plate. I was there every step of the way. I went and got an apartment at 18 years old. By the time I was 19, I already had a 401k plan. Then I went and bought a house. Sure, things didn't work out with the girl, but guess what? I was still there for the kid. And every single weekend, I see my son. Every single Thursday, Dad's picking him up from school. And every single Monday morning, Dad's taking him to school. And I'll be damned if one day that doesn't happen because somebody has a mental health issue. We all deal with stuff. We all have issues. The best way to overcome them is by stepping up to the plate and overcoming them. Don't run from them. Take them face on, head on, and battle through it. That's the only advice I can give you. And to the Republicans out there, the Democrats out there, to the government out there, to the people that have a bigger impact that can create laws and end laws, to those people, do something about this. I don't care about Tide Pods anymore. I don't care about anything else. I'll keep driving down the road and hit a pothole. I could care less about a pothole ruining my car. I can go buy another car. I can't buy another life. And 16 people lost their life today. 16 people lost everything. And their families and their friends are affected forever. Those 16 people that have been confirmed killed don't get to be 17 years old and graduate high school. They don't get to go to their senior prom. They don't get to have a kid at 18. They don't get to be 19 and get a 401k. They don't get to go to college and party with their friends. They don't get to listen to this podcast. They don't get to do anything because somebody ruined it because they have a mental health issue in this frickin' country. All I ask is for all of us to come together and find a way to beat this thing. Find a way to cure it. Get off Twitter, get off Instagram, get off Snapchat. I could care less about the stupid update on Instagram. I don't care about Logan Paul and what he does on YouTube. And I damn don't care about Tide Pods because I don't even use Tide Pods to wash my freaking clothes. You know what I do? I worry about stuff like this. I worry about making my kid a better man one day down the road. Start worrying about your kids. Start fixing their issues. And to the parents out there, if you can't fix your kids' issues because you got your own issues, fix your issues. There is a mental health issue in this country, and that's the only way I can describe today's tragic events in Florida. To the families and the friends of those families, to everybody affected by it, my thoughts and my prayers are definitely with you, 100% of the way. And to the police officers, to everybody that helped get those children to safety and tried to save lives today, I appreciate your service. I appreciate everything that you do for our country and for our communities. I don't have much else to say about the tragic events. I can only say mental health issues so many times. It's devastating. It's frustrating. And it bothers the hell out of me that nothing gets done. Hopefully something happens. I hope that this gets shared. I hope this gets comments and likes and everything else that you can on social media for it. I'm just hoping we can fix the mental health issue in our country so we can raise our kids, raise our families with the freedom that we were given, the freedom that we earned. Again, my thoughts, my prayers are with everybody that were affected by the tragic events in Florida today. Let's get to football, shall we? Let's get to the draft. Before I do, Cover One, the podcast, it's brought to you by First Down Playbook. First Down Playbook is the #1 playbook resource for football coaches with over 30,000 plays. First Down Playbook is a database of youth, high school, and flag football plays, color-coded with coaching points for every position on every play. Check it out today at firstdownplaybook.com. That's firstdownplaybook.com. First Down Playbook, one place, all the football. So as we jump into the football stuff, as we jump into the NFL draft, got some news over the weekend, over the last couple of days. Reuben Foster, San Francisco 49er linebacker, the former Alabama Crimson Tide standout. Last year, he was one of the most talked about prospects. Why? Because, well, one, he was hell of a talent on the field. One of the best linebackers we've seen in a while. And he fell down plenty of draft boards last year because of a scouting combine issue, an incident. There were some medical red flags as far as his shoulder goes and things like that, but he was at the combine. He was doing some questions. Some doctors wanted to take a look at him, and he was kind of standing in line waiting, and all of a sudden he kind of broke out and was like, "Do you know who I am? I'm Reuben Foster, and this is uncalled for, and I should be moving up front. I got things to do and people to see and stuff like that." And maybe I'm taking it a little bit out of context, and I'm not wording it verbatim, but it was an issue right away, and it was a big red flag for me. If you can't relax on the biggest stage of your career, the biggest job interview of your life, I didn't really like it, and I moved him down my board a little bit. I can't remember where he ended up falling on my board. I believe he was in the teens somewhere. Off of talent, though, he was a top 5 player in the class last year. Ultimately, he ended up being a late first-round pick last year. San Francisco took him at 31st overall, and it was a very good pick because it was a late round one, and John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan really looked like geniuses when they took him because it was a new regime there, and it's like, okay, we're not going to let this stuff happen. That was kind of the vibe that you got, and it was like, all right, I like the pick, and I still like the pick. Foster, though, was arrested with the domestic violence case right now against him, some weapon charges, it sounds like, and it's very much still figuring itself out, but right now, the 49ers have a decision to make. They had a linebacker that is probably going to get suspended. How long? Could be 4 games. It could be the entire year. You never really know. He could appeal it. And then again, all charges could be dropped, and he just moves on with his life. Last year, he had 72 tackles for the 49ers and had a fairly good rookie year. Definitely looked like, okay, a steal at the back end of the first round. They got a top 5 talent, top 10 talent at 31. That looked like a great pick for the 49ers. But now they're in a decision because Reuben Foster could be done for potentially the year. And when you look at this thing and you look at their roster, it's like, okay, well, now that Reuben Foster's gone, what does this team do? Where do they go? Because they're going to be picking either 9th in the NFL draft, or they're going to be picking 10th in the NFL draft this year because of a coin flip with the Oakland Raiders. And it's kind of like, why can't we just do the coin flip? Why do we have to wait till the combine? I mean, it's the 9th pick of the draft and the 10th pick of the draft. Why they wait till the combine, I actually don't really know. But at this point in time, the linebackers that the 49ers have, obviously Reuben Foster, but again, we don't know what's going to happen there. So you got Foster, you've got Eli Harold, Brock Coyle, That's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot there. So, I mean, really, getting a linebacker was potentially something that they were going to be doing this offseason anyways. Maybe in free agency. They've got plenty of money to spend. Obviously, they just paid Jimmy Garoppolo a ton of money. And he's getting about $27.5 million per year. So you take that off of I believe it was close to $100 million in cap space that they have. But overall, they still have a ton of money, and adding a veteran linebacker or a nice piece at $3, $4, maybe even $5 million a year isn't that bad of a move for San Francisco because they could use it. And now essentially they're probably going to be in the market in free agency to do one and sign one. But also the draft is a very nice spot because they're going to be picking 9 or 10, like I said, and they could be in a position to go Tremaine Edwards out of Virginia Tech, the linebacker. I understand a lot of people love him as an inside backer, but I don't think it would be a bad thing to have him as a 3-4 outside backer rushing off the edge. I really like what I see from him in that regards. People say he sheds blocks really well. I thought at times he looked stiff, and I thought there was times that he just kind of avoided blocks. But I mean, I haven't watched a ton of film on him. I've only watched 2 games, and that was just my initial reaction. So I need to get, obviously, back into jumping into the film of 4 or 5 games on as many prospects as I possibly can, but sometimes it's hard, We all know that. But, Tremaine Edwards, obviously, he's a good fit. And then there's Roquan Smith out of Georgia, who's my top linebacker. I've got him as a top 5 or 6 player in this class. And he's a really just quick, good mental processing skills are great. He reads plays very well. Good tackler. From my understanding, he only missed 2 tackles on the year. I love what he can do as far as getting to flats and dropping into his different coverages. He might not have, quote unquote, from everybody else, he might not have great man coverage ability, but he's a guy that you can blitz up the middle. He's a great run stopper. He's so quick. He processes again. And I think he'd be fantastic in San Francisco. And we've talked about it on this podcast before. I had Bryce Rossler on a couple of weeks ago. We brought up Roquan Smith and Reuben Foster. Could you imagine that pairing? So, I mean, depending on what happens with Foster, I think that will, especially over the next couple of months, they're obviously going to be looking at linebackers. They're going to be looking at cornerbacks. So you could say Josh Jackson out of Iowa, Denzel Ward out of Ohio State, Jair Alexander out of Louisville. Those guys could definitely make potentially sense for them at 9 or 10. I think Jackson would. Definitely is my top cornerback, so I think he would make some sense. If Minkah Fitzpatrick is there, no matter what linebacker is there, I think they would have to go him, best player available without question. And then, you could make a case for maybe Mike Hughes out of UCF. I don't think at 9 is a good idea, but if they potentially move back, you never know. You never know what teams could be thinking of moving up. I don't think they would obviously trade with Arizona, who's picking 15th, because there's Arizona being speculated to go get a quarterback. But Buffalo is a team that could be in the market to move up as well. So trading back for San Francisco, that could make sense. I like the thought of a linebacker though at 9 or 10. I like the thought of a cornerback at 9 or 10 as well. So my top 2 guys for them currently, and it could change. I don't think it will though. At 9 or 10, it would be Josh Jackson out of Iowa, and it would be Roquan Smith out of Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see what the 49ers do the rest of the way at the linebacker position specifically, but throughout the draft process and what they do. Moving forward, though, I've had this thought over the last week since Eric Turner, since we did the video breakdown, and we got done and we kind of talked a little bit about what we might break down next. And I didn't really have an opinion. To me, I don't care. Let's talk football. Let's break it down. But I thought in the back of my mind, I'm like, it would be kind of cool to talk receivers a little bit, because after Calvin Ridley, I feel like I'm not saying there's a big gap, and I'm not saying Calvin Ridley's on an island of his own as far as receiver. I think he's the top receiver in the class, but it's who falls after that. I mean, truthfully, people are all over the place. Brad Kelly, who recently just got added to Cover One, he's just put out a piece on Bayshawn Hamilton, if you will. That's what we called him down in Mobile. It's Deshaun Hamilton, the receiver out of Penn State, if you don't know. But he's a great receiver mind. Brad Kelly is. He breaks down receivers left and right. He does fantastic work with it. And he broke down Deshaun Hamilton. And, you look at this class, and he's got Dante Pettis as his top receiver. Now, I personally don't agree with it. I understand why he likes him. I can see it. I like Calvin Ridley a little bit more. Calvin, though, it kind of splashed here and there, but, was he heavily utilized in Alabama's offense as far as a consistent basis? Yes and no. Statistically, you see a big drop-off from his freshman year till now, but realistically, he was their top weapon, and there's a reason for that. I think he's the most complete receiver in the draft, and there's plenty to like about him. 6'1", 190, young. I mean, you're not going to get a young receiver with them, but you're going to get a 23, 24-year-old guy. I believe he'll be 24 when the draft is over, and he's on the roster, going into training camp. People are making a big deal about that, him being 24. But again, what falls after that? My board, it's Auden Tate. He's a top 30 guy for me. 6'5", 225, young guy. I think he's definitely a little bit raw, but I like what he can do as far as getting the ball, at the catch point. Maybe not the best route runner around, and again, he's not the most elusive guy. He's not going to, I would be shocked if he ran, a 4.3 40 or something like that. But I think he's just a good player that is going to grow into a complete player. And again, while he is a little bit raw, I'm going off the fact that I think he can be something special. And he was a good receiver for Florida State. It wasn't like he was just a nobody coming out of anywhere. And then after Auden Tate, it's James Washington for Oklahoma State on my board. Again, these are two guys that I like. I don't like them as much as Calvin Ridley, but personally, what's the consensus? I mean, because I've seen stuff all over the board. Calvin Ridley, number one. Now I'm seeing stuff Dante Pettis is number one. I'm seeing Cortland Sutton out of SMU consistently, number one. James Washington's number one. Anthony Miller is number one. Anthony Miller out of Memphis, and then Cortland Sutton out of SMU. Those guys are number one. Michael Gallup not getting that number one talk, but he's getting a lot of second round buzz, being a good route runner, strong hands, stuff like that. So it's interesting on where this class is, and I think it's really like last year there was so much talent. You saw Mike Williams, Corey Davis, John Ross, Juju Smith-Schuster, pretty good receiver class. Now you're going into it and you're looking at this one and pretty good receiver class, but the rankings are all over the place. Where I felt like last year it was consistently Corey Davis or Mike Williams, and then you would sprinkle in John Ross or Juju Smith-Schuster as 3 or 4. And now I'm looking at it, and everything's all over the board. It's all over the place. Calvin Ridley's probably the most consistent number one receiver listed, but I've seen a lot of Cortland Sutton, a lot of Anthony Miller, so I'm curious where we are collectively as a group on it. And personally, it's mine. My board is Ridley, Tate, Washington, with Gallup and Miller after that, and Sutton would be after those guys with Dante Pettis and Marcel Aitman. So, again, I'm not into the 4 or 5 games yet on every single player. I'll get there eventually, and I'll pretty much have a better idea. But after 2 games, I feel comfortable with my evaluations on certain players. But speaking of that, players that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm really disappointed in myself, and I'm going to own up to it. I definitely thought I was going to find something with Marcel Frazier, defensive end, out of Missouri. So we're switching gears from San Francisco to receivers to now from receivers to a defensive end. Marcel Frazier was a player that I watched a little bit before going to Mobile at the Senior Bowl, and I saw some stuff that flashed, but it was of course, one of those highlight reel type of stuff. I wasn't able to pop in the all 22 tape. I wasn't able to pop in a live broadcast game just yet. And then it was the week of the week before the Senior Bowl was the Shrine game week and Shrine practices and stuff like that. And apparently he was jumping off the wall. He had a great burst, had a great get off, was working his hands, looking great, length was there. And I started buying into that, and I saw, some of the highlights, and I'm like, all right, yeah, this guy's going to be pretty good. So I initially ranked him pretty high on my premature, top 40 big board. And then I look at it, and I go and I dive into 3 games, and wow, was I blown away at how bad I missed the grade on that one. And I'm glad I'm catching it now in February and not in April. And, in April I'm saying, oh, Marcel Frazier's going top 15, when in reality he has no business going in round 1, and I don't even know if he's got the business to go round 2. The burst is slow, and I get it. Guys take their time getting off the ball if they're doing line stunts, the twists and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it was consistent. And I watched full games, full defensive series, where it was consistently last guy getting into his stance, last guy firing off the ball, not working his hands, getting stood up in one-on-one battles, no motor. I love guys that have a high motor. Mo Hurst, high motor guy. Taven Bryan, high motor guy. I like guys that like to get up to field, at the heels, bend down the line of scrimmage and make a play from the backside. Frazier rarely did that. The only time he made that play where he was, I guess you could say, quote-unquote, backside pursuit was when a play was going right up in the A-gap. Sonny Michel was running up in the A-gap, and he made a nice play, getting to heels, shedding a block, disengaging, and then bending and making the tackle. He's made a couple of decent plays, but he's incredibly raw. He doesn't show the athletic ability. I wouldn't be surprised if he ran a 4.9 40. I wouldn't be surprised if he only benched, 225 12 to 15 times. Maybe he benches it 25 times. But the strength, he doesn't show it on tape. High motor, he doesn't show it on tape. So Shrine Week, maybe it's, hey, I'm going to have a coming out party because I'm applying for the biggest job of my life. But I'll tell you something that I've learned, and it is something that it holds truth, and it holds truth every single year in the draft. Watch the film, trust the film. Don't buy into the hype. Don't do those things, because it happens far too much where guys are like, oh, I like this guy because so-and-so. I like this and that. So it's always very interesting to see what happens. But I'll tell you, I missed the mark on Marcel Frazier, and at this point in time, I don't know exactly where I have him. It's not extremely high at this point. I think I have a day 3 grade by the time this is going to be all said and done. I've got 2 more evaluations, or 2 more games that I want to evaluate him on, and then we'll see where he is. But ultimately, Frazier's a guy that I missed the mark initially. I'm glad I caught it, though. So we'll see. But like I mentioned, with San Francisco potentially trading back, we talked about some of their plans in the draft, some things that I think that they should be doing. Linebacker, obviously, at this point, I think is their top need outside of cornerback. Offensive guard or offensive tackle makes sense. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I forgot to mention it. Quentin Nelson, Connor Williams are 2 guys that I would highly covet at 9 or 10. But trading down makes some sense, too. 15 to Arizona, trading within your division, I think that's out of the question. But a team that makes a lot of sense, right, would be at 21 or 22, the Buffalo Bills. They got 2 first-round picks. They've got 2 second-round picks. They've got plenty of draft equity. They've got some players that they could potentially cut ties with. Tyrod Taylor's one. Obviously, it doesn't make sense for San Francisco at this point because they just paid Jimmy G. But Cordy Glenn, often injured, decent cap hit, but he makes a lot of sense, right? They could be in the market for looking at a left tackle, but I don't know if they go offensive line in round 1 just because of you never know. But again, trading back, it's a nice option. And some stuff that was brought up today, and it was weird. I had missed it throughout the morning, and then I saw it today as I got home and I was prepping for the show, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm not going crazy. I talked about the Buffalo Bills potentially trading up. I think that, getting a franchise quarterback is something that they are going to potentially be doing in this draft. And maybe it is Lamar Jackson that they covet at 21 or 22. Maybe it's Mason Rudolph at 21 or 22. Maybe it's Mason Rudolph in round 2 or Lamar Jackson in round 2. Who knows? Those are the most common names that you'll see at 21 or 22 or potentially in round 2. But today, Eric Galko of Optimum Scouting was on WGR in Buffalo, and Howard from WGR put on Twitter, Galko brought up that the Bills have been aggressively scouting the top college quarterbacks this season. Belief around the league that have told Galko the Bills are high on Rosen. He's the apple to their eye. So what does that mean? Well, that means right now this could be a smokescreen. It could be. I'm not counting it out that it is, and I'm not saying it isn't. But there are sources to it. I'm sure there's plenty of belief. I'm sure there's plenty of substance behind it. And I'm curious as to who they could be trading up for. So I'm going to discuss a potential draft day trade. I'm just going off an experience that happened in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. We were, me, Eric Turner, and John from Cover One. We were walking out of the stadium at the Senior Bowl, walking right next to Brandon Beane, the Bills' general manager. We thanked him for getting to the playoffs for the first time in a long time, and it was very cool. He was very down to earth, just cool guy to talk to. And then he sees Dave Gettleman in the parking lot, gives him a couple of kidney shots. They say some things that I'm not going to repeat on the air, but it was interesting to see. It was cool because obviously they know each other from their time in Carolina, and now that you think about it, we're heading into draft season. We're probably going to see a lot of different types of draft day trade scenarios where we could potentially be talking, what if Buffalo traded up from 21 and 22 or 21 or 22 to get to number 2 in the draft, number 4 in the draft, and potentially get Josh Rosen. Obviously, a lot will depend on what Cleveland does at number 1, but I think it would be very interesting to see the Buffalo Bills put something together, and I'm not going into the mid-round picks. I'm not going into next year's first. I'm not talking about how much of the future they have to salvage to get up to number 2. But if they really like Josh Rosen, which I think is probably pretty accurate, I mean, they saw Baker Mayfield, they saw Josh Allen, they saw Luke Falk, they saw these quarterbacks down at the Senior Bowl, and maybe they didn't like them. I mean, I saw Sean McDermott walk by me 4 or 5 times. I saw him standing against a field goal post watching the quarterbacks. I mean, they were watching them closely. So I believe that. And I believe this report from Eric Elko that they probably covet Rosen the most. That's the belief around the league. So if they like Josh Rosen the most, they got to get up to number 2 in my assumption to at least know they have a decent shot at getting them. What is that going to take for the Giants to trade back to 21 and 22 or potentially just 21 or 22? Well, I would have to think Cordy Glenn comes to mind, the left tackle. But I'm really thinking outside the box. And I get it. There's going to be mid-round picks. There's probably going to be a 2018 second-round pick, probably a 2019 first and a third. There's going to be picks. I mean, obviously, you're jumping up 20 spots, 19 to 20 spots. It's going to cost you a pretty penny. I'm not going to pull out the trade value chart and talk the numbers and the hundreds and the percentages behind it. But I'm going to talk about how I think realistically, I think there's some substance behind it. This isn't just some dumb fan talking football. No, I think that I have realistic opinions on this, and maybe I'm biased, but I think this is a realistic option. What if they brought in the 21st overall pick, Tyrod Taylor, some mid-round picks, and got all the way up to number 2? The Giants moved back. The Giants just hired Mike Shula as their offensive coordinator. They ran a lot of read option, a lot of zone option stuff with, a lot of read option, a lot of quarterback option stuff with Cam Newton. So what if they did that in New York? I mean, you're not going to run that with Eli. Probably going to run a really basic offense with Eli Manning. Get your quarterback. Maybe they do it in the draft. But what if they got Tyrod Taylor? I believe his cap hit is right now, without the bonuses and stuff like that, I believe it's at $10 million. $10 million for Tyrod Taylor for 1 year. You give him a year. You let him learn under Shula. You let him learn a little bit under Eli how to throw a football, become accurate. I mean, why wouldn't the Giants take it? You get a bunch of draft picks, and there's reports going around, and I believe these too, that the Giants could be cutting a bunch of dead weight from their roster. John Jerry, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, Brandon Marshall. You're freeing up a ton of cap space if you do that. If you cut John Jerry, it's like a $1.5 million dead cap hit, but you're clearing up altogether like $4.5 million. So there's $3 million back in your pocket. If you cut DRC, it's like a $2.5 million cap hit of dead cap money, but ultimately it's an $8.5 million cap hit. So there's $6 million. So right there, with a team that has $21 million in cap room, according to SpotRack.com, you have $21 million to spend. You just cut 9. You bring in Tyrod Taylor for basically nothing. You got a ton of draft picks in return. You give him an option to learn under Mike Shula. Maybe let him run the offense that Shula's comfortable running. You have Odell Beckham back. You pay him. You have Sterling Shepard. You have Evan Ingram. Maybe you move back to 21 and 22 and you go best players available. Or maybe you just go back to 21 or 22. You got to understand there's a big difference between and or. But they get the guy that they want at 21 or 22. And I'm not talking quarterback. I'm talking potentially running back. Maybe Darius Geis is there. Sonny Michel could be there. You could talk offensive tackle. They could definitely use Mike McGlinchey out of Notre Dame. I just wrote about him. I believe he's a right tackle, and I don't buy the hype of, you know what, I watched him, I don't like him. He's not that good. He's not athletic enough. He's not this, he's not that. You know what? He played left tackle last year. It's not easy to do. He played right tackle for most of his career. He's got 51 career games under his belt. He's versatile. He moves well in open space. Maybe not the greatest technician in the world, but you know what? He'll manage as a right tackle. I think he'd be a pretty good fit at 21 or 22 in that offense with Mike Shula. We'll see, though. Some other options for the Giants would be, at 21, 22, you could be looking at some secondary help. You could be looking at maybe Derwin James. You could be looking at Denzel Ward potentially, Jair Alexander, Mike Hughes. There's some talented players there that you could be looking at. Obviously, offensive line again. Offensive guard out of Georgia, Isaiah Wynn. So there's a lot of things. Buffalo obviously salvaging a little bit of the future, but they were a playoff team last year. They got a ton of draft picks, but they've got a ton of contracts that are coming up, and they've got to re-sign them. And that's why part of me believes they're just not going to pull the trigger on this trade. And the reason being is because they probably realize, hey, getting rid of Tyrod Taylor is not going to happen. Getting up this high in the draft might not happen. Again, though, you never know. I didn't think that they were going to trade up to number 4 and draft Sammy Watkins a couple years ago. They did. So we'll see. I mean, granted, it was from 9 to 4. There was a 5-spot jump. There was some draft equity there that was taken. But when you're the New York Giants, just because everybody thinks that they need a quarterback, because Eli Manning's definitely lost a touch. He's lost some touch on the football. He's lost a step or two. Just because those things are happening doesn't necessarily mean the Giants are buying into the fact that there's a franchise quarterback for them of the future. And I get it. Taking a quarterback, if you're the Giants right now, having that player sit under Eli for a year, because Eli's not going anywhere, and Eli's going to start next year. The only time he doesn't is if they're 2-10 again, and they're like, you know what, we're going to bench Eli and see what Davis Webb has to bring or whatever rookie they draft. And ultimately, they're thinking, okay, if I draft a quarterback at 2, you know what's going to happen? I don't have to worry about a full-on rebuild in the future. I have my franchise quarterback for the future right now, and I can build around him in the next couple of drafts. But they could be thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. If you're cutting some players, DRC, Brandon Marshall, John Jerry, maybe some other guys, you're not bringing back certain guys. You're going to need depth because your depth players, the guys that were on the bench last year, that a lot of them did play anyways, those guys are going to have to become starters again because you're cutting the players that you signed or drafted and turned into starters. DRC was a starter. John Jerry was a starter. Brandon Marshall was a starter. Granted, a lot of these guys got dinged up. A lot of these guys have off-the-field issues in the locker room. Could be because of the coaching staff that was there last year. But ultimately, you're going to be asking depth players to step up. Therefore, you will not have any depth. So moving back from 2 to 21 or 22 is going to be quite the haul. And if you got a player like Tyrod Taylor to run Mike Shula's offense, I think it'd be pretty interesting. That's all I'm saying. So it'll be interesting. I don't know if that's a logistic draft day trade or if this report potentially of the Bills being high on Rosen, if that's just potentially a smokescreen. It could be. I think there's some fire behind it, though. I think there's some substance there. So we'll see. It'll take time, plenty of time, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see what kind of stuff there is, and I'll be putting together a piece of some realistic draft day trade scenarios over the next couple of days. I'll put something together for you to read and for you to rip me apart and rip me to shreds. Okay? Sounds good. I'm excited to get into that, and that's something that I'll be doing in the next couple of days. Other than that, that's all we have to talk about as far as the NFL draft, football, stuff like that. This weekend, we will get a video breakdown together, and we will break down 2 more prospects for you. We'll talk in detail like we did about Mike McGlinchey and Lamar Jackson. If you haven't seen it, head over to YouTube and find Cover 1 on there, and you'll see that we put something together with McGlinchey and Lamar Jackson. A lot of fun. Eric Turner should be back with me on the weekend doing the video breakdown. And as for today, that's all we got. So we will see you next week here on Cover 1, the podcast.